to some issues around education and jobs, and pleased to have Representative Gary Holder-Winfield here of New Haven, who's the chair of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus and has taken a leadership role in the achievement gap and in reading. Mr. Winfield.
Thank you, Elaine. So I'm going to pass in both directions a copy of our 3-year plan. We don't have enough for everybody, but if you go skip one person, you could probably each look with each other. But I want to start off by saying that if you've heard me talk about the achievement gap or jobs in the last 3 years that I've been elected, you'll know that my hair is on fire. And it is on fire because we have had reports telling us about what is happening with this state in terms of demographic shifts. And I contend that we have done almost nothing about the change in demographics, which tell us that a significant portion of our workforce in about 9 or 10 years will be those minority populations that we talk about when we talk about the achievement gap and when we talk about unemployment. I'm going to give you some numbers. 16.4%, that's Hartford's unemployment rate. 14.5, that's Waterbury. 14.3, Bridgeport. New Haven 13.8, and New Britain 13.2. That's not the 9% we talk about. And those are the measured unemployment rates. Those aren't the real unemployment rates. In the last few years, we know that black unemployment has decreased. It is not because employment has increased. It is because they have given up. So we have some major problems. And if we're going to talk about the issues of children, we have to talk about the issues of adults who take care of those children. Adults in these communities are in serious trouble. And again, I do not believe we've done much about it. We just had a session where we talked about jobs. I indicated that we need to talk about jobs in a targeted way in these communities, because if we don't do something very soon, we'll be in a place where this state is in some serious trouble. Let me put it to you this way. If we talk about people aged 25 to 29, incoming educated workforce, those people today are 16 and 20. You're past the point where you can do something with them. And we're still not even dealing with it at all. What are we going to do about that? And now let me tell you what I was told. I was told, well, we did some legislation around manufacturing. And manufacturing is in these neighborhoods you're talking about. Well, let me read off when I went to look up manufacturing, where I found manufacturing. Ellington, Naugatuck, Avon, New Fairfield, Groton, Danielson, Danbury, Trumbull. I'll keep going if you want me to, but we're not talking about New Haven, Hartford, Waterbury, Bridgeport. What are we going to do about these kids? We need to have a new approach, a targeted approach that deals with the issues that we are really going to be talking about very soon. Or we're going to be at a point where we're up against it and we just can't do anything about it. I'll get into our goals as a caucus. You may know that 3 years ago actually, the Black and Hispanic Caucus of the legislature here decided that it felt as though there wasn't enough being done around education quickly enough. And so we decided to do a tour around the state to figure out what was going on with education, what the achievement gap looked like, felt like, what the real impact in people's lives was. So several of us from the caucus went to a lot of cities. And we came back with a plan to deal with the achievement gap. That plan, to be honest with you, was largely ignored until the Connecticut Commission on the Achievement Gap went around and did the exact same tour and came back with the same plan, which is fine, because we then worked with that commission to get some of the same things that we had been trying to talk about done. Out of that came some initiatives that were allowed us to do things around the dropout rate, eventually became the genesis of what became the parent trigger, although there were external forces that helped to get us there. And then currently we have, we're somewhere in the middle of our 3-year plan for dealing with the achievement gap. Our 3-year plan is reflective of the thinking of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, but it is not something that is in stone. We're still working on it. And so you have before you a copy of our goals and components of the plan. The goals, obviously, to improve student reading success. That's not just for those communities we're talking about. We have a big problem with the achievement gap, but if we're being honest, we know that even the students who aren't on the wrong side of the achievement gap in the state have an issue as compared to the nation. We want to improve teachers' ability to identify each student's reading level and skill set so that they can intervene properly. And this will relate to component 1 of the plan, which is the assessment tool. We also want to make sure that parents are equipped to become partners at home. Some of them may want to but don't have the ability to, and that actually in some ways relates to component 1. We also want to increase the number of third graders who are at goal on the Connecticut Mastery Test. We think 3rd/4th grade is critical. For years, people have been talking about 3rd/4th grade as the point at which we know there's a point of departure. There's a point from there where, in some respects, people believe you may be figuring out how to build jail cells, right? But we also know that's the point at which a lot of people are diverted into special education, many of whom we actually believe are incorrectly diverted into special education. And so we want to do something around that. We've been talking about it for a long time. We think it's about time that we actually do something, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And point 5 kind of talks about that, decreasing the inappropriate special education referrals. Point 5 is to help early childhood, early care and education providers know what to do in pre-literacy and language development. And so these are many of our goals. I want to talk for a minute about the assessment tool. So it was our thinking, and I want to thank Elaine, actually, because Elaine helped us to figure out where we were going with this. It was our thinking that we talk a lot in terms of education reform about the relationships between adults, and whether teachers do this, administrators do that, parents do this. But our question was, well, there's an issue around reading. What exactly are we doing about reading? And at the same time as Elaine and I were having some conversations and some other members of the caucus, I was actually just talking to people in education because I'm not an educator. I wanted to find out from people who know better than I what might be the issue. And many of them were telling me that they were having problems when assessing children. And then Elaine actually said to me that there were some people who had done some work around assessment and did I want to talk to them. And so what we came to figure out was that the tool we use for assessing students might not be the best tool to use. It's difficult, it's unwieldy, and it's probably not as practical as it should be, and that's the DRA/DRA2. So we found out that we could do a pilot program with a new tool, and we're in the process of doing that in several schools in Connecticut. And we will have some data coming back shortly. The tool that we're using allows for quicker turnaround for assessment. So here's what we were thinking. If you have teachers who are able to teach reading, but they don't know what the issue is, so you do an assessment tool and you find out that your student can't read, and I'm oversimplifying this. You find out your student can't read, which you should already know. If you find out your student can't read, that's not very helpful to you. What you need to know is why your student can't read. Is it inability to recognize two words together, inability to recognize order of letters, sounds, all of those different things. So you might be able to teach them how to fix whatever the problem is, but if you don't actually know the problem, you have to take more of a scattershot approach. One of the other things we're looking at is, along with this reading, so we know that Connecticut has an issue around the foundations of reading tests. If we look at our numbers, we know that they aren't where we want them to be when the teachers are coming out of school. But we also have an issue where that's one thing for the teachers who are coming out of school, but those already in the field don't necessarily have to take this test and pass it. And so we've gotten into this discussion both here in the legislature and with teachers and their unions, and that will continue, about what can we do about this. Because we need those teachers who are already in the field to be as competent as possible to teach reading. And we don't want to do something that's punitive. We want to actually help. That's part of the reason we do the assessment tool, and now we're looking at the foundations of reading tests.